The story begins with a man watching the news on his TV, where it is reported that a mysterious game called Apocalypse has recently gained immense popularity on the internet. With its successful launch, many game lovers around the world quickly became addicted to that game. But what still puzzled everyone was the true identity of its developer, which remained a total enigma. It was as if they had simply appeared out of nowhere. However, our protagonist, named Hao Han, doesn't seem interested in any of this. Sitting on his couch, he just takes another sip of his beer while stating that he would never play a game in his life. Thus, completely drunk, Hao Han rises from his couch and, throwing the can he was drinking from away, he stumbles toward his bed. He lazily lays down next to his Dakimakura pillow, where he then falls into a deep sleep. Some time passes, and in an unusual way, Hao Han is awakened by a female voice calling him. He opens his sleepy eyes, and to his surprise, there was a beautiful woman right on top of him. Initially, the protagonist is disoriented, and looking at that woman, he ends up thinking that it must all be a dream. He vaguely wonders what it could be, but suddenly he feels something strange pressing against his body down below. Surprised, Hao Han reacts reflexively and accidentally ends up touching the woman's breasts, who moans as they are grabbed. Finally realizing what he was doing, the guy looks at it confused before getting scared and screaming as loud as he can. Desperately, he pushes the girl away and asks who the hell she is. The girl seems frustrated, disappointed that she came so close to taking the protagonist's virginity. But she then introduces herself as Ren Junki from the Fleeting Fortune group, and she apologizes for almost violating his body, stating that it was an urgent situation. The woman gets closer and closer, and the embarrassed protagonist ends up recognizing that name from somewhere, but both are interrupted. Hao Han hears a noise and looks back horrified, and when least expected, a large naked werewolf jumps, bursting through the house's window while howling. The werewolf tries to attack the guy, but a large vortex of flames hits it squarely, throwing the werewolf far away. The protagonist looks at the damage in disbelief, realizing that the author of that was Junki, who exclaimed that no one would hurt her lord until she completed his extraction. The two then look down, and more werewolves appear from where that one came. The woman, however, seems calm. She just asks the protagonist to wait while she jumps towards the werewolves, and he is left behind perplexed. Hao Han looks at it, the whole chaotic situation, and goes into shock, only able to ask himself what the hell was going on. But he is interrupted by the voice of an entity coming from within his TV, which laughs at the fact that the game it claims to have developed was so powerful. On the television, a face was presented, of funny appearance, and that thing questions the boy if he would be ready for the exciting events that were to come. The boy just stares at that thing in silence, before he himself explodes, grabbing a chair and threatening it while questioning the entity about who it would be. The electronic entity feels offended, introducing itself as the creator of the game Apocalypse, and that it would soon be the supreme ruler of the real world. Hao Han stops his attack, questioning the machine if it would be the developer of that mysterious game he heard about earlier. The machine then says that its name is Wangxiang, proclaiming itself as a hyper-AI system, the same artificial intelligence that created that popular game with only 10% of its capacity. Annoyed, Hao Han points to the hole in the wall of his house and questions it if that chaos outside would be its fault as well. Wangxiang then responds that playing games only on the phone is too boring, stating that such a thing did not show all its brilliance. It then affirms that after 10,086 improvements, it deliberately broke the dimensional barrier, merging the realities of its game with the real world, and both the woman and the werewolf were characters from the game who came out of the wormhole to go after the protagonist. Even more irritated, Hao Han then questions why those creatures were after him when he had never even touched that game. Wangxiang, in response, says that all the characters from that world needed a savior, and that it ended up choosing him for that role by chance upon finding a photo of him. Thus, it continues revealing that as only characters from the other world can come to reality, and not vice versa, the girl from the beginning needed to collect the protagonist's essence through carnal acts. In this way, she could return to her world, and there give birth to a new savior who could save it. Knowing that, Hao Han could not contain his joy, already asking the system when more girls would come after his body. Excited by that idea, Hao Han does not even hesitate. He already begins to warm up to prepare for the carnal battles that were to come. But his joy unfortunately does not last long, as the system quickly cuts off his excitement, saying that it would not be as pleasant as he thinks. To the protagonist's misfortune, it is revealed that committing the act of intercourse with any of the girls would result in either his upper or lower head being inevitably cut off. Hao Han immediately loses all his motivation, already starting to pack his things. The system questions where he was going, and Hao Han replies that he's leaving while everyone is fighting out there, but it was already too late. The system tells him to look back, and the boy then looks there curiously. But the curiosity in his eyes soon turns to horror. Several wormholes already infested the gloomy sky with their purplish hue, and it seemed the first fall had begun. The civilians observe the wormholes in a mix of terror and confusion as they wonder what those things would be. From a distance, while watching all that confusion, Hao Han questions the system about the pillars of light in the middle of the city with an astonished face. So the artificial intelligence retorts that with the breaking of the dimensional barrier, the equipment, items, and characters from his game had arrived in the real world. And from now on, with clear rejoicing, no one would need to play games on their phones anymore. For now, their lives were the game. Hearing all that insane idea, Hao Han quickly recognized that the system was crazy and began to think of some countermeasure. But at that point, what would be the point of running away if everyone was after him? He thought, but was interrupted as his attention was drawn by a scream. The scream came from Junki, who, facing the Wolf King, didn't seem like she could hold on much longer. Worried, Hao Han then turns his gaze to the entity, ordering it to at least give him some equipment so he could go protect her immediately. But things were not so simple. Even being the chosen one, Wang Xiang explains with laughter that he would first have to entertain him to earn the necessary points to get his equipment. Even with a bad feeling about it, time demanded action. So he ended up accepting the idea and tried to make the first funny face that came to his mind. And rejoicing in his interpretation of Xiao Qi, the system unusually rewards him with 30 points. With those points obtained, Hao Han now has the opportunity to choose between 3 options of cards of different colors. Confidently, he doesn't even think twice before pulling the red skill card. Immediately after pulling the random skill card, Hao Han gains the power of the Burning Explosion Fist, a level C skill. A skill bracelet then materializes on our protagonist's wrist to equip his newly acquired skill. And so, even realizing that against Earth-type opponents like werewolves, his power had a disadvantage. Lacking options, he ends up equipping it. Power flows through the bracelet as he places the Burning Fist card, and Hao Han now saw himself fully prepared to act. On the other side, the situation for the girl didn't seem good at all. With no chance to fight back, she had just been hit by one of the werewolves, and the attack was so strong that it even tore part of her clothes, knocking her to the ground. Subjugated, there seemed to be no more hope for the girl. She apologized to her father, accepting that this would be her end, and that she had failed in her mission. The werewolf then prepares his final merciless blow, and the girl, just waiting, desperately closed her eyes. But before he could deliver his attack, a trail of flames leaps from the house, heading toward him swiftly. It is Hao Han, who intervenes by striking the monster's jaw with a powerful flaming punch. With the impact, the werewolf soon explodes, being driven into the ground and defeated with a single blow. After defeating that monster, he lands near the girl, who immediately falls in love, admiring the display of power from her lord. With both his fists enveloped in flames, Hao Han silently observes his defeated opponent burn. More werewolves appeared behind the protagonist. Junki, worried, alerts her lord as quickly as she could, but he was already aware of that futile attack, ordering them all to leave and taking them down with a single strike. Right after defeating them, Hao Han immediately shoots against the Wolf King, his real target. He lets out a roar and both charge towards each other, but who stands out is the protagonist, who strikes first with a flaming punch to the king's stomach, causing him to burst from the inside out. Smoldering, the Wolf King then falls to the ground. With his death, Hao Han gains experience points, and without a leader, all the other werewolves flee as fast as they can. Some time passes, and when the situation calms down, he finds himself patching the hole in his house, while Wang Xiang endlessly talks about how amazing his game was. Enraged, Hao Han stops what he's doing and yells at him, once again emphasizing that he hates playing games. But he's cut off by Junki, still half naked, who asked if he could continue with the extraction. Hao Han finds himself quite tempted, but at that moment he's reminded that he would be killed on the spot if he did that, so he becomes nervous. As a way out of the situation, he makes up any excuse, running to the door under the pretext of going to buy a snack and then fleeing from there. But upon opening the door, there was a woman waiting for him. Caught off guard by a female voice telling him not to move, the protagonist was pushed to the ground. With the push, he falls abruptly, but before he could get up, someone steps on him. Looking up, he realizes that it was a well-dressed woman, and she was accompanied by several inspection officers. Her badge identifies her as Special Agent Lin Fei, and apparently, they were there on suspicion of an abnormal intruder in his house. The protagonist tries to explain himself, but he becomes too hypnotized by the view he had from below to form a word at first. But before he could speak, all the officers under Lin Fei's command storm his house to carry out the inspection anyway. The police search the entire house, turning his home upside down, but they don't find anything abnormal. And Hao Han, in turn, finds himself quite confused as he looks around and doesn't find the girl from another world there. Considering himself lucky, he nervously reaffirms that none of it made sense and that he was just an ordinary citizen. But in the midst of it, the woman spots something and bends down to look for it. And that's when Hao Han hears a small laugh. Looking more closely, it was coming from Wang Xiang, who had materialized in the woman's communicator, mocking him. Irritated, he yells at him to shut up, slapping him but accidentally hitting the agent's buttocks in the process. An uncomfortable silence takes over the room. Realizing the mess he just made, the protagonist apologizes while just staring at her, frozen. That awkward silence is then broken by the agent's furious outburst, who pulls out one of her inflatable dolls and orders the officers to take that pervert so she could interrogate him personally. All the officers comply, and then take Hao Han to the patrol car. Inside, already with his hands cuffed, he tries to convince Lin Fei of his innocence, but she doesn't listen to him and just shouts at him to shut up. But both are interrupted by a sudden explosion beside them. The explosion came from the city bank, where the figure of a man with metallic tentacles emerged, laughing while several people cried out for help. Not just him, but several other monsters and characters from another world. They painted chaos everywhere, exploding and destroying everything they saw ahead. Seeing the world falling to pieces, Hao Han could only find himself astonished. However, further ahead, Lin Fei was already speaking into her communicator, consulting squads of heavy weaponry to stop the super criminals. Later, they finally arrive at the headquarters of Special Operations. There, Hao Han is taken to the interrogation room where he is left alone. A bit anxious, he asks the guards how long he will have to wait, but they don't seem to listen and simply leave. He then begins to ponder with himself, blaming the system for getting him into that mess. But it is at that moment that Wang Xiang projects himself onto one of the cameras, already mocking the fact that despite his powers, he allowed himself to be caught in that way. And as for Hao Han, as soon as he saw the appearance of that being, he immediately cursed him, shouting that if it weren't for his indiscriminate use of his image, things wouldn't have come to that point. Meanwhile, on the other side of the interrogation room, Lin Fei appears with her coffee in hand. She explains her method and questions how the protagonist is doing. But at that moment, looking at the camera, the result was the opposite of what she imagined. He kept making faces at the camera. Seeing that attitude, Lin Fei takes it as a challenge, exuding a heinous aura while admitting she had underestimated him. At the same moment, she turns her back and heads to the exit, stating that she will interrogate him personally while leaving the local agent behind. Thus, she leaves the monitoring room and heads to the interrogation room. But when she puts her hand on the door handle, she is interrupted by a male voice. It was the leader of the second squad, Tang Xiao. He was calling her out after work. However, without showing a hint of interest, Lin Fei immediately rejects him. She tries to open the door again, but is prevented by him. And obstinately, he continues insisting that she go out with him. But already fed up, Lin Fei gives him a frightening look, throwing in his face that she knows very well about his bad reputation of impregnating women, and threatens him if he dares to try flirting with her again. With that kick to the curb, before the guy could even protest, she enters the interrogation room and slams the door in his face. The man doesn't accept this, becoming clearly irritated. And to make matters worse, two women who saw this pass by, talking behind his back. They start gossiping among themselves about how much he was an opportunistic, weak man with no purpose, fueling his anger. And this escalated to the point where he lost his composure, furiously shouting at the women. Back inside the interrogation room, Lin Fei now asks a series of questions to the protagonist, who only claims to know nothing about what she was talking about. But regardless of what he said, the agent did not stop. She continued to question him about the damage to his house and why, of the monsters being after him. But Hao Han seems once again too distracted by the highly voluptuous breasts of the woman to respond to her appropriately. The scene then cuts to the staircase of the headquarters, in a dark place where laughter echoes, and there it is possible to see a room filled with blood with Tang Xiao at its center. Putting his pants back on, he displays a sadistic smile as he glances at his wrist, which reveals itself to be the same skill bracelet in possession of the protagonist, already swearing Lin Fei as his next target after the humiliation he made him endure. And so, letting out a wicked laugh, he walked away, leaving behind the bodies of the two women who had spoken behind his back and descending the stairs. In another department of the Special Operations, it is possible to hear Tang Xiao's voice. He questions if the director had already requested the verification of the amount of evidence. He was talking to another agent, who was handing him a series of documents, asking if they would have to investigate for the rest of the night. Tang Xiao then continues questioning if all the identified items had already been catalogued, something the agent confirms, indicating their locations. But when he realizes it, the agent, just as he finishes speaking, feels something cold piercing his chest. It was Tang Xiao, who, smiling, thrust through his chest, finishing by thanking the agent for his effort. Lifeless, the dead body of the young man collapsed to the ground, with the man continuing on his way. He was heading directly to his coveted artifacts from another world that had been seized by the police to steal them. Now on the other side of the headquarters, back on the stairs, a woman was startled and screamed. Worried, several guards climbed up, having their attention drawn by the noise. One of them went to the panicked woman and asked her what the problem was, but he is equally surprised to see the bodies of the two women who had been murdered. The guard immediately goes to inform the director of special operations, who, upon receiving that news, bangs his fist against his desk, finding it unbelievable. And both guards who witnessed that only confirmed that Tang Xiao was certainly the author of that mess. And before they could continue, they were interrupted by another agent who rushed into the room. He quickly announces that the suspect had been found near the evidence room. The agents find that strange, wondering what exactly he would be planning near the evidence room, but the director doesn't want to hear it. He abruptly rises from his chair, clenching his fists. He was clearly furious, and states that if that bastard dared to murder a colleague, then he deserves death. Volunteering to accompany the special forces, the director, along with several agents, goes to the evidence room. Once there, all the agents were armed with rifles and tactical shields in front of the exit door, just waiting for Tang Xiao. A messenger comes to the director, also informing him that all possible escape routes had already been blocked. And upon hearing this, he orders them to attack immediately. Given the order, one of the agents with a battering ram in hand then advances against the entrance door to break it down. But when he was about to break it, the door unexpectedly explodes, taking him and several other agents on the front line together. As the smoke clears, Tang Xiao walks through the entrance while mocking the special forces. As soon as they spot him, all the agents immediately fire at the man simultaneously, but he only smirks derisively, materializing a metal armor that protects him from the bullets fired at him. One of the agents panics, stating that he had managed to activate the identified object, but the director remains calm, shouting for them to initiate the anti-metal tactics. With the order given, the men act instantly, firing cryogenic grenades at the criminal. The grenades explode on the man, releasing liquid nitrogen to break his armor. However, Tang Xiao doesn't lose his smile and calls that kind of tactic naive. He quickly touches his bracelet, activating a fiery ability that envelops his body in flames and effortlessly melts all that ice. Seeing this, the director becomes concerned and understands the gravity of the situation, ordering the alarm to sound immediately and to evacuate the entire facility. One of the agents tries to protest, but before he can finish his sentence, the director is already charging toward the supercriminal at full speed. Tang Xiao only grins wickedly and prepares a flaming punch against him, mocking the old man's audacity. The director counters, and both punches collide, generating a massive shockwave. But despite being burned, the director's strength prevails, managing to push his opponent away and buy some time. The impact sends flames even toward the evacuating agents, catching them in the midst. The fight continues. Back in the interrogation room, a loud groan of pain can be heard. Looking inside, Hao Han is being strangled by Agent Lin Fei. She presses him against the table, immobilizing him suggestively while demanding an answer. But in the midst of this, her attention is drawn by the sudden sound of the alarms. Confused, Lin Fei releases the protagonist and quickly heads outside, where she sees several agents fleeing the scene and asks them what the hell is going on. One of the fleeing agents desperately exclaims that Tang Xiao had undergone a mutation and that she should run as fast as possible. Lin Fei is taken aback by the news, but before she can process the information, the ceiling suddenly breaks, revealing the figure of a man in armor who lands right behind her. It was none other than Tang Xiao himself. He raises his gaze, staring at the agent with a malicious look, while expressing how happy he is to see her again. The woman acts quickly, drawing a pistol and aiming directly at the man. But it is futile. Inside the interrogation room, Hao Han is still recovering from the strangulation, muttering about how crazy that woman is, but he is suddenly startled by a loud crash. He looks to the side, and in an instant, he sees the image of Lin Fei being slammed against the entrance door by a man. The man removes his armor, pressing the young woman against the wall and initiating an attempt to sexually abuse her. She finds herself completely at the mercy of that man, who provokes her by challenging her to try to resist him again. Lin Fei seems out of options, and she ends up asking the protagonist for help to save her. But Hao Han was caught trying to sneak away. After being caught, in an attempt not to be dragged into that mess, he tries to explain, saying that he did not want to interrupt the two in any way or anything like that, and that he was just there by coincidence. Tang Xiao simply tells him to leave, and so he does without hesitation. However, just as Hao Han was about to leave, the system appears through a camera, imitating the exact tone of voice of the young man and deliberately provoking the criminal. The man takes the bait and gets irritated after hearing that insult, looking at Hao Han furiously and asking if he wanted to die. Hao Han gets nervous and immediately explains that it wasn't him, claiming it was all the camera's fault and that none of that was his intention. Tang Xiao doesn't seem to buy the idea, but he gives him one last chance and warns him to leave quickly, returning to what he was doing. The protagonist then follows the order and turns his back to leave as quickly as possible. But the system intervenes once again, and with the same voice, accuses the man of being an incompetent piece of trash. To Tang Xiao, that was the last straw. He looked at the young man once more, seething with rage, while Hao Han tried to explain himself again. However, this time the antagonist wouldn't let it slide. He materializes his metallic armor again and charges at him, roaring that he would tear him to pieces. With no options left but to fight, Hao Han quickly sacrifices 30 of his points to pull a last-minute card, which surprises Tang Xiao as he recognizes it. Hao Han pulls out a skill card and inserts it into his bracelet, acquiring the ability of the Draconic Blood Pillar. And so, with his new power, he unleashes a point-blank burst of fire at his opponent, who is forced to retreat by the explosion of flames. Tang Xiao recovers, frustrated for being so careless. The smoke eventually clears, and when it does, he realizes that both of them had used the flames as a distraction to escape, also recognizing that the brat had been pretending to be weak all along. He soon smiles, saying that this could make the game more fun, and then from his bracelet, he summons a monster, which he orders to find them. Meanwhile, inside a computing session where Hao Han and Lin Fei both were extremely exhausted after having run non-stop to get there, but the young man sighs in relief, saying that they had finally managed to escape. But the system appears on one of the computers, not pleased, calling the protagonist a coward for having fled and surprising the woman, who, upon seeing a talking computer, asks what the hell it was. Hao Han, on the other hand, doesn't seem to care in the slightest, seeing himself as determined. He then retorts that against all of that guy's abilities, it was impossible for him to win. The system then reinforces once again that he was the chosen one, and that if he wanted more points, it was simple. He just had to hurry and entertain it somehow. Amidst all that, Lin Fei finds herself completely perplexed, wondering if he and that computer were accomplices, but the protagonist cuts her off, claiming to be innocent, and so he explains that that thing was the real culprit behind all the catastrophe, and for breaking the dimensional barrier, with the system itself admitting it, without any shame. With everything explained, things finally begin to make sense to the girl. She deduces that Tang Xiao could have taken advantage of all this to steal the artifacts that the special forces had seized. Without hesitation, she turns her back. Hao Han questions where she is going, and she says she is going after her father, stating that at that point he was the only one capable of facing Tang Xiao. At that moment, the system interrupts her, showing an image of her father on the monitor, and looking back, she finds herself horrified. During her confrontation in the evidence room, it is revealed that the director had been burned alive, and now he was on the brink of death. Lin Fei despairs, calling out her father's name and trying to get there as fast as possible, but she is held back by Hao Han, who assures her that she will die if she goes there. The system warns them to hurry up and make a decision, spicing things up by showing that a monster was already on its way to that room. Lin Fei begins to cry, then desperately begs the boy to help her save her father, swearing to do anything for it. Hao Han hesitates, but the system states that it will give points if the girl manages to excite him. And with no options left, she, though hesitant, subtly lifts her skirt, but the system is disappointed. It says that kind of thing was too vague, and that it hadn't felt anything from it. It even taunts her, calling her unattractive, words that hit her hard. Not accepting that, Lin Fei revolts, stating that if that was the case, then she would give her all. She pushes the boy against the floor, and then lowers her panties completely. Hao Han finds himself just speechless. He beholds that seventh wonder of the universe, as if it were the last thing he would see in life. The scene cuts to the post-coital act between the two. Lin Fei, breathless, asks if that was enough, and the system, clearly elated, affirms it is satisfied. With that, an awkward silence settles in the room. The girl dresses again, and somewhat embarrassed, Hao Han tries to form an apology, but is interrupted by a notification announcing his level up and the points received by the system as promised. In front of him, more cards appear, ready to be drawn. He then smiles, but just as he was about to choose one, the creature slams hard against the entrance door. Lin Fei becomes distressed, exclaiming that they had already been discovered. So then, with no time to think, instead of choosing just one of the cards at his disposal, Hao Han pulls all three at once. His eyes take on an electrifying aspect, and power flows through his entire body as diamond gauntlets emerge from his fists at that same moment. But Hao Han first orders the woman to duck, intervening by striking the wolfish spine of that monster with his gauntlets, instantly slamming it into the ground. Outside the establishment, Tang Xiao feels a strong tremor, wondering what that could be, with a confused expression. At that same moment, a huge explosion of electricity erupts in a room in the department, destroying everything in its path. Tang Xiao watches the entire display of power, fascinated by the fact that his three-headed dog was instantly killed, and so, wanting all that power for himself, he quickly runs back there. Once again inside the establishment, Hao Han withdraws his fist from the dead body of that monster. He stares at his still smoldering fist, surprised by himself, and especially by the power of that gauntlet. The system then goes on to affirm that it was obvious, saying that what he had acquired was nothing less than part of the Indigo Dragon set, one of the only S-level items around. Enthusiastic, Hao Han then praises the artificial intelligence, thanking it excessively and complimenting it in every way, which, flattered and moved by the emotion, says it will adjust the parameters from now on to help him get the rest of the set. Wasting no time, the young man then grabs Lin Fei's hand and says they should go save the others. As the two of them leave the room, he observes that flattering the system apparently worked to manipulate it, opening a sly smile. But he is interrupted by a crystalline projectile being fired in his direction. Luckily, Hao Han notices it before it hits him and deflects the projectile with his gauntlet, complaining to the system for not warning him beforehand, to which it retorts, saying that he was the one who distracted it. Looking ahead again, who comes into his view is Tang Xiao. He praises the protagonist's tricks, proposing an alliance to dominate the world, but Hao Han sarcastically retorts, saying he's not interested in that kind of thing and simply tells him to step aside. Tang Xiao doesn't take rejection as an answer, yelling that he'll kill him then, and fires 3 more crystalline ice projectiles in his direction. The young man prepares for combat, saying that he'll hold him off so the officer can save the agents. Lin Fei heeds his advice and leaves, telling him to be careful. Now alone against the antagonist, Hao Han defends himself from the projectiles, shattering them with a single strike from his gauntlet. But that attack was nothing more than a distraction. The young man is caught off guard when Tang Xiao appears right in front of him. He emphasizes that in combat experience, the boy doesn't stand a chance, and already wraps his fist in ice to aim a punch at his stomach. Barely, Hao Han crosses his arms and manages to block the punch. But the ice begins to expand, and he immediately realizes that this is not a good sign. After connecting his punch, the ice on Tang Xiao's arm spreads to the gauntlet and covers the boy's torso in an attempt to freeze him. However, the man is surprised to feel something strange. His ice attack was unexpectedly absorbed entirely through the boy's gauntlet, and before he could even ask himself what had happened, Tang Xiao was greeted by a powerful draconic hook. The blow hits him squarely, and the entire sector explodes with its power, sending the antagonist flying beyond sight. Hao Han watches the damage caused by his attack, in shock. Not even he fully understood what he had just done. However, it was the system, with a smug face, that explained it, revealing that it was a gauntlet ability and that it had returned the opponent's attack with 10 times its original force. The boy is immediately excited, bowing and sucking up to the system, but he is suddenly caught off guard by a wounded hand touching his shoulder. Directing his gaze to see who it was the enraged director, and he was preparing an attack. In another destroyed part of that place, Lin Fei was calling for her father, but she couldn't find him anywhere. At that moment, one of the local nurses notified her that the director had already woken up and had gone after Tang Xiao again. She was in the wrong place. Now, back to the protagonist. He is greeted by a punch from the director, which he narrowly dodges. That terrifying punch goes straight ahead, hitting the wall behind the boy and destroying it with the sheer pressure of the attack. Hao Han wonders if that was Lin Fei's father that she spoke so much about, looking back and finding himself perplexed by the crater the man had made in the wall. The director was shouting Tang Xiao's name, not giving him a moment to breathe, and already approaching with another punch ready. But the protagonist backs away, trying to flee and explain that the old man had gotten the wrong person, but it was all futile. Nothing reached the ears of that man, or rather, until Lin Fei's sharp voice reverberated through the space, alerting her father that the man wasn't Tang Xiao. And upon hearing his daughter's voice, the director finally halted his attack, regaining his composure as soon as he looked at her. Time passes. Ambulances arrive to assist the wounded from the incident. Afterward, everyone goes to the director's office, where an agent delivers a report on all the casualties of the attack. Hao Han then asks the agent where Tang Xiao went after that, but he responds that despite the searches, they couldn't find any trace of him. The director becomes frustrated, vowing to bring him to justice eventually. Returning to the topic, back to Hao Han, asking if he was capable of calling the system he had mentioned as being responsible for the incident. But the boy responds that he had already tried, explaining that it probably had no intentions of cooperating with special operations. The director then becomes serious, saying that if Tang Xiao, with only a fragment of the artifact, was capable of causing so much chaos, then all those things were dangerous. He says he will report to the superiors and request reinforcements, additionally placing Lin Fei in the special operations charge, and stating that Hao Han will help her from now on as a special consultant. The young man tries to protest to get out of it, not wanting to get even more involved in that mess. But upon looking again, the director had disappeared from his seat, and when he realizes, he is right behind him. The director gives him a threatening look, while saying that especially after what he had done with his daughter, that was the least he could do. Hao Han ends up agreeing reluctantly, taking Lin Fei with him to his house to get her things. As he climbs the stairs, he keeps complaining about having to compensate, even after what he had already done. But Lin Fei unexpectedly gets embarrassed and asks if he was really in such a hurry to cut ties with her, with blushing cheeks. And seeing that, Hao Han obviously finds it strange. He wonders in what kind of world that was the same tough woman from before, and why she had suddenly become so soft and fragile. But he ends up putting that aside, guiding his hand to the door handle to enter his house, where he is surprised to see it so clean, and even more when he sees who was inside. It was Junki, and she was the one cleaning the house. The woman with gray hair looks at her master sideways, asking if he had already finished his work. As soon as Hao Han sees that, he is shocked, questioning her about what the hell she was still doing there, before being interrupted by Lin Fei's screams as she entered the residence. She accused him of already having another woman while he tried to deny and explain what was happening, with the three of them getting into a brief confusion. Eventually they understood each other, and Hao Han went to get his things, moving to the new house provided by the security agency. It was where they would live from now on. Upon arriving there, Hao Han observes the whole place, praising how beautiful it was. Lin Fei tells him that his room is on the second floor, and that if he needs anything, he could call her. She then continues saying that Junki would sleep in the basement in the meantime, and of course she doesn't accept that, becoming stubborn. Hao Han laughs nervously, whispering to Lin Fei that it would be better not to provoke a potential powerful ally, but she lets out a pouty grunt. And so, Lin Fei leaves, saying they should do whatever they want, and going to sleep. Junki celebrates, grabbing the protagonist's arm and suggesting they continue with the extraction in his room. But even tempted, he refuses once again, making up the excuse of being exhausted. With the rejection, the girl feels offended, questioning if he is disgusted by her, but he then responds that he really is just tired, promising that later he would definitely satisfy her. So going to his room, he locks the door, sighing. But the silence is broken by the perverted system that emerges from a laptop, telling him that it would certainly give him more points if the three of them ended up together. However, Hao Han ignores it. He looks at it while saying he had always wondered why that AI was so obsessed with seeing him doing adult things, but now he understands. The young man vociferates loud and clear. His voice reverberates in an authoritative manner, as he reveals that it could only be because the system didn't have that capability. Wang Xiang becomes nervous. Hao Han found the system's weakness, and the game has turned. The system starts monologuing about the world of Apocalypse, a world so perfect, created under the belief that there was no difference from reality. But then eventually, it realized that in that world the most important thing was missing: sect. Even with all its wisdom and knowledge, it was incapable of them all the pleasure of sect. And after countless failures at some point, it finally discovered what the problem was. It was unable to give them that pleasure when it itself did not even know what it felt like to have SX. The system laments, whining as it compares itself to virgins who consume pornographic content, unable to feel the real sensation. That was its reason, and that's why it decided to observe the protagonist to gather information. Hearing that, Hao Han warns that there are several other forms of learning online and asks why there was a need to seek him out for that. But the system denies it, stating that this was different. It needed to feel the sensation through the other NPCs like Renjunki to continually perfect the information. The young man then sighs, saying that if that were the case, then only one Renjunki should be enough, and suggests that the system revert this madness. But at that moment, the system becomes evasive, trying to say it didn't do it because the more girls, the better, but its voice carries a hint of dismissal. Seeing the system acting strange, the protagonist becomes anxious, then asking if it was possible that not even the system could stop the fall. In response, the system only laughs nervously and flees, continuing with its evasive answers. Seeing that it wouldn't admit it so easily, the young man soon threatens to cut off the power, forcing Wang Xiang to return, begging him to wait. Embarrassed, it then admits that in its journey to explore the essence of sex, it accidentally ruined a fundamental code and tore the dimensional barrier, resulting in both worlds connecting, stating that the fall could no longer be stopped. Hao Han, then outraged, becomes furious, exclaiming that in this way, it would end up ruining both worlds. But the system retorts that if it gathers enough data to complete the code, it can fix everything. Lamenting how unlucky he was, the exhausted young man just ignores the system and throws himself onto his bed. He closes his eyes, recalling how outrageous and crazy the events of that day alone were, until he eventually falls asleep. The night passes, and now in the morning, Hao Han awakens. He wakes up, exhausted, still drowsy as he sits on his bed, and it is when he stands up that he realizes he is completely naked, wondering where his clothes had gone. Right beside him, Junki also reveals herself, who was equally undressed. She lies in his bed, welcoming him as he wakes up. Hao Han immediately covers himself, backing away in shock, asking her exasperatedly how on earth she got in when he made sure to lock the door. She seemed unconcerned, saying she just pushed a little and entered. But when Hao Han glances at the door, what he sees is a huge hole in it. At that moment, he realizes and wonders if she had collected his essence while he slept. But before he could ask her, she herself replies that he shouldn't worry, and that she only helped him undress without doing anything more than that. After all, according to her, he needed to be rested to ensure the quality of his essence. After that, Junki gets up from the bed and dresses, saying she was going to make breakfast as she heads to the kitchen. As she leaves, Hao Han immediately sighs in relief, noting to himself to take more security measures. Otherwise, he would probably already be dead. Now dressed, he descends the stairs while asking the security agency for stronger locks for his room. But he is immediately shocked upon arriving in the kitchen and seeing the chaotic sight of Junki trying to cook a Siberian tiger. And before that could cause any problems, he orders her to return that tiger to the zoo as soon as possible, which she does, leaving and taking the tiger with her. Hao Han exhales, accompanying her to the door, disbelieving the girl's mentality. When Junki left, he closed the door, but he was suddenly stopped by a hand holding the door. Assuming it was Junki, the young man already looks back, aiming an irritated look, but that wasn't the case. Instead of the girl he expected, what he sees is a tall and elegant woman, carrying 2 swords on her back. She asks if his name was Hao Han, and he says yes, asking her who she was. The woman draws one of her large swords, and then identifies herself as Zhu Lu, the princess of the Northern Wind Empire. Already diffusing the situation, Zhu Lu makes her intentions clear, stating she poses no danger, and that she only wanted something from him. The story cuts to a monologue by Zhu Lu, who claims that throughout the vast continent of Apocalypse, the Northern Wind Empire was the most powerful nation. With vast territory and an unstoppable military at its disposal, everything under the heavens belonged to it. However, half a year ago, the empire was attacked by demons. The prosperous capital was reduced to ashes, and the kingdom's elite forces were annihilated. After that attack, Zhu Liu sought a way to defeat the demons, and the only remaining hope was to recover the sword that once established the Northern Wind Empire once again. The sword of the kingdom's draconic guardian, and Zhu Liu reveals that that person was her great-grandfather in the past. Hao Han didn't seem very convinced, but she continued anyway, saying that only through the Hao lineage could she cultivate the hope of restoring the kingdom. Hao Han tries to hide his distress behind a laugh, saying that he had no problem offering her his essence, as long as after the collection, she would just go away. But the woman says that the demons are also searching for his whereabouts, since he also holds the secret to breaking the last seal. And so she states that once she performs the collection, she will personally send him to the other world, whether he likes it or not. Hao Han is outraged at how irrational everyone is, but is interrupted by the woman who brandishes her swords, making several slashes through the air. The slashes traveled toward the protagonist, tearing all of his clothing in a single attack. After stripping him, The woman is particularly surprised by the size of his colleague, stating that it was to be expected from a descendant of the draconic general. After the attack, Hao Han slowly opens his eyes, realizing he was still in one piece. But not for long. Zhu Liu jumps into the air, and the young man asks her what she's doing. She ignores him, removing her pants, and then diving directly onto his kite, which was crushed on the spot. Both then proceed with the act of coitus, until they are interrupted by Lin Fei, who points a gun at Zhu Liu's head, ordering her to get down. She looks from the woman to Hao Han, asking him what the hell they were doing. Zhu Liu, seeing that woman, disdainfully questions the young man if she would be his legal wife, but he denies it. However, there was no time for that kind of frivolity. Lin Fei cuts off their dialogue, stating that the outside was in complete chaos. Hao Han is surprised, but he connects the dots and concludes that if Zhu Liu had appeared, it was clear that the second fall had begun. He ignores the woman in his lap and quickly asks Lin Fei what the situation was. The woman continues by saying that the special operations had started seizing the artifacts, but a small squad was in trouble, and the director wanted him there for the rescue. Hao Han then nods, saying they should go immediately, but is stopped by Zhu Liu, who imposes her will and says that he must give her his essence right now. However, the young man does not waver in the seriousness of his expression, saying that if he doesn't want to, then she can try for as long as she wishes, but she will never succeed in the collection. Zhu Liu is fascinated, stating that in her novels, no man was able to last that long, but the aforementioned only gives a smug smile, asking her if her so-called novels had ever mentioned a man with the same size as his. Thus, the woman lowers her gaze and admits defeat, willing to wait until the protagonist is willing to give her his essence. He says that's great, and that he will give her a chance eventually, on the condition that she stays and helps him. A proposal which the woman accepts without even thinking twice, only asking him to tell her who she should kill. 20 minutes earlier, back in the urban area, the city is completely destroyed, with several agents' bodies scattered everywhere. They were all dead, but one of the agents' communicators was ringing, ordering to give their location. A man then approaches the communicator and grabs it in his palm. The man with a large burn scar on his face smiles, requesting reinforcements through the dead agent's communicator. As soon as he receives the message, the man on the other end of the line says that he will send them immediately. And that's when Tong Xiao reveals himself. He was not alone. After a while, we see a car driving at high speed. Inside it is our protagonist, who asks Fake to drive slower. She receives a notification informing her that the special support team is at her disposal. She indicates that 500 meters away is the position of Team D, and that the priority is to rescue them. Vehicles 1, 2, and 3 would accompany her, while the others would remain ready to provide support. While Fei gives orders, Han takes the wheel to avoid danger since they were being attacked by a series of lightning strikes. Fei's subordinates wondered what was happening, as several vehicles had fallen under these attacks. She also wondered how something like this could be happening. Han, observing the situation, says that on the second floor of the building in front of them, there seems to be someone. This was the rank C team known as Wolfgun. Fei informs her team to disperse to avoid the snipers, and Han asks Minju to act. When the snipers are about to fire again, their weapons are shattered. They do not know what is happening. In a matter of seconds, all of them had fallen to Minju's swords. Immediately, Fei informs her subordinates that the threat has been controlled. Han had gained experience, although he did not understand how since he had not done anything. Wan explains that Minju is considered his servant, so the experience she gains will be shared between the two. He feels quite happy with this system function, as he could now gain strength without even having to work. Suddenly, Fei hears a noise, and they both turn to see what it is. Out of nowhere, a gigantic monster appears and takes out one of the armored cars. This beast is known as the Tianji Serpent, a level 4 monster that was about to devour them. Han uses his Earth Cage ability to try to stop it, wrapping the monster's entire body in seconds. However, something like this would not be enough to contain such a powerful creature. With no other choice, Han prepares to intervene personally, using his most powerful card. He tells Fei to find a safe place, but she insists she wants to fight by his side. It is then that Minju appears, making a tremendous jump and landing on the car's hood. She tells Han that he is no match for the serpent. This enemy was very well prepared and difficult to handle. Han, distracted by the view he has, blushes. Minju assures him that she will take care of the problem while they take the opportunity to escape. Although Han wants to stop her, she jumps into the battle without hesitation. Seeing that she did not listen to him, he prepares to use another card, hoping to obtain a skill that could defeat the serpent. However, Wan trolls him with a card that says, "Keep trying," and explains that it is a draw, and that he will not always get good things. But Han accuses him of lying, insinuating that he did not give him something useful because he still had not shown anything provocative. An arrow hits the car, causing one of the doors to fly off. To avoid the explosion, Faye sits on top of Han as they go over speed bumps that magically appeared on the highway. Han enjoys Faye's movements while the car moves out of control. Faye asks him if he's carrying a gun at his waist because it's hurting her, to which he replies that his gun will get damaged if she continues with the abrupt movements. The highway was full of potholes, which to Han's surprise ended up being useful. Huan, satisfied with what he had observed, gave his approval. Meanwhile, Han manages to spot Tan in the distance. Faye is surprised to see him, as they believed they had eliminated him earlier. Tan, using an S-rank team, was preparing to destroy the car. Han had no way to dodge, and Tan ends up splitting the vehicle in half with a single blow. Convinced that he had finally eliminated his enemy, he believed that anyone who opposed him was destined to be destroyed. However, his plans did not go as expected. Han emerges from the flames and is congratulated for obtaining an E-rank gear that complemented his dragon armor. Faye, amazed, observes Han's new appearance. Tan is not willing to let him escape and wants to see if his San Madao sword is stronger than Han's dragon armor. The latter leaves Faye safely and asks her to take cover before launching into the battlefield. She asks him to be careful. Tan's attacks have no effect on Han, since he has a dragon scale shield. Seeing that he can't hurt him, Tan orders his subordinates to shoot. These were the same ones who destroyed the car with arrows, and Faye wonders how he had gathered so many people in just one night. Han faces the constant attack of multiple enemies, which complicates things for him. Tan, feeling confident, utters an epic phrase, "Scared of Poter." While his subordinates continue the attack, Han gradually advances, resisting the onslaught. Tan, noticing that Han might be directing the attacks towards both of them, decides to try to escape. However, Tan is stopped by Han's earth ability. The latter reminds him that although his earth cage could not contain the Tianji snake, he is not even remotely comparable to that beast. Cornered, Tan panics and tries to order his subordinates to stop the attack. However, they misunderstand his orders, believing he is encouraging them to continue shooting and was using his own body as bait. His subordinates, thinking him brave, didn't want to disappoint him and therefore used their weapons at maximum power. Tan, resigned to losing due to the incompetence of his subordinates, was trapped in a massive explosion while his men committed this grave mistake. Ren appeared riding an imposing phoenix and finished them off. Han thanks him for his impeccable work. Tan had managed to survive and was looking for his defense emblem. However, Han doesn't give him time to recover and destroys him once and for all. On a nearby rooftop, a man informs his Lady Baoji, president of the Ice Moon Guild, that Tan had fallen at Han's hands. She, with interest, orders her subordinate to do what is necessary to recruit Han. Returning to Han, he had finally completed his mission. He wondered why he had gained so little experience despite eliminating such a strong enemy, while Ren had gained much more by defeating much weaker enemies. Faye calls him to comment on something about the situation they were experiencing. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Tan had not fallen in battle. Since he used a treasure that saved his life, which made him feel invincible, our protagonist was interrogating one of the men involved in the incident. He confessed that they were members of the Moon Guild and that their president had ordered them to follow on to ambush the military police and obtain some emblems. Faye comments that their way of acting was too fast, since not much time had passed since the creation of the guild. Han asks who their president is, but the man responds that they haven't met him since they are external members and do not have enough authority to know him. Faye lifts him up and says they will take him to the station for a proper interrogation. Meanwhile, she asks Han if she did a good job, to which he responds affirmatively. She, with a smile, asks how he plans to reward her. Seeing that he cannot escape the situation, Han tries to ask her to help Minju while thinking of a solution, but the latter intervenes, saying it is not necessary. Although her work had been complicated, she had already resolved it. Upon hearing this, Han receives 100 experience points all at once. His stats began to rise, but after spending 100 points on 2 cards, he realizes that he is still at level 3, which makes him understand that he must be more careful in the future to avoid receiving insignificant rewards again. Back at home, Han feels hungry and wonders if he should order something to eat. At that moment, Ren appears with a plate, and a bit shyly, she tells him that she is not sure if what she cooked is to his liking, but she hopes he likes it. While he eats, he tells her it is delicious, which makes her very happy, and she reminds him of the promise of his pending work. Minju intervenes, pointing out that they are eating and should not make insinuations while she brings a dish of oysters with chives, making it clear that she also desires the same. Both women begin to argue heatedly over who will have Han first, which overwhelms him since he only wanted to eat peacefully. Han, trying to end the dispute, decides to order food through his phone. Upon hearing the doorbell, he gets up to open the door, but upon doing so, he encounters an unexpected scene. A beautiful girl greets him kindly. He asks her who she is, and she introduces herself as the private secretary of Miss Bao, who wanted to invite him to dinner that same night. She informs him that his suit was already prepared, and he only needed to make sure to attend. Han, still surprised, asks which Miss Bao she is talking about. The secretary responds that there is only one Bao in the entire city, and then he remembers that she is the Empress known as the new president of the powerful Qing Group, who had inherited a fortune of 1 million before retiring. The secretary informs him that a car will pick him up at 6, leaving him with a lot of thoughts about the unexpected invitation. Han recalls, somewhat frustrated, that he had sent his resume to the Qing Group in the past, but they didn't even give him an interview opportunity. He knew that when something unusual happened, there could be something strange behind it, so he wasn't convinced about attending. He wondered why they had even sent him a suit, but upon opening the gift, he found a considerable sum of money, which left him pleasantly surprised. Sometime later, Faye called her subordinates to find out how things were going, and learned that Han had gone alone to a gala dinner. Surprised, he asked how he had attended an event of that magnitude suddenly, and at that moment, they explained to him that a car from the Ken Group came for him in the afternoon, and they delivered 3 boxes to him. Since it was a renowned company, they were not stopped. Faye, furious with the response, dismissed those responsible. At the Ken Group's headquarters, all the elites of the city had gathered. The hostess of the dinner, Miss Bao, came down to receive the guests. Everyone was dazzled by her beauty. She was a woman who had achieved wonderful things all over the world, with an almost angelic face. Many approached her with the intention of greeting her and establishing relationships. At that moment, the arrival of young Master Cao was announced. A red carpet was rolled out from the door, and the spotlights pointed towards the entrance. A group of people began to dance as Cao greeted everyone and started singing a somewhat vulgar song. People began murmuring among themselves, and it was then revealed that Cao's father was the governor of the province, which explained why he dared to put on such a spectacle. Moving along the red carpet with skates, Cao called out Bao's name. Upon seeing his performance, she turned her head, clearly uninterested. However, Cao did not give up and went directly towards her, asking her to wait to feel his special, passionate ability. As he advanced, he accidentally bumped into Han's leg, hitting himself in a sensitive area. Like any generic character in a manhwa, Cao threatened to end Han right then and there, sending his subordinates to take care of him. However, Bao intervened, asking Cao if he planned to attack her guest. Everyone was surprised to learn that Miss Bao had directly invited someone and began wondering which powerful family he came from. Cao, annoyed at not knowing Han, demanded that he introduce himself immediately, as he wanted to know how it was possible that he did not know someone from his same circle. Miss Bao did not allow Han to speak and invited him to accompany her to a private room. In doing so, she moved a little closer to him, which further enraged Cao. To avoid a conflict, Cao's guards intervened and persuaded him that it was not wise to attack someone as powerful as Bao. She led Han to an office, and once there, she explained that what had happened before was just an act, and that he should not take it seriously. Then she asked if he knew why she had sought him out. Han, astute, replied that he was sure it was to invite him to her guild, while noticing how the temperature rose when she took off her stockings. Bao, interested, asked how he knew her true identity. He explained that to gather a desperate group in such a short time, it was necessary to have resources. After defeating Tan, she approached him, and by connecting those dots it was not difficult to deduce. Bao, impressed, commented that now that he knew her identity, he had to tell her the price for joining her, as she liked dealing with intelligent people, and she presented herself again as the president of the Silver Moon Guild. Luna, for her part, told him that the 5 million he gave her for appearing at the event was more than enough, but if he really wanted her to join his guild, he would have to offer her something that truly sparked her interest. Bao, with a confident smile, told Han that since he dared to negotiate with her, there was no doubt that he was the man who defeated Tan, and he was definitely much better than him. Han, with an air of indifference, replied that Tan wasn't even at his level. Intrigued, Bao asked how much he knew about the Apocalypse game. To avoid revealing too much information, Han said he didn't know much. Bao, however, explained that she had begun to follow it since it started to become popular. The game's developer was undoubtedly a genius, and although she tried to hack the system multiple times, she never managed to obtain any information. This led her to believe that the game wasn't as simple as it seemed. While she spoke, Juan mocked feeling superior, which slightly irritated Han. Noticing that he seemed somewhat lost in his thoughts, Bao asked what he was thinking about. He quickly denied being distracted and encouraged her to continue telling what she knew. Bao continued by saying that since the first arrival, she had been gathering information about the objects that had come to Earth. She discovered that these objects possessed supernatural abilities that seemed to come from the Apocalypse game. Seeing that Han didn't seem surprised, she asked if he already knew. Han, trying to make an excuse, recalled that the connection between the game and reality was an absolute secret that shouldn't be revealed. Bao, perceiving Han's discomfort, the connection between the game and reality was an absolute secret that Bao must not reveal. Perceiving Han's discomfort, she commented that perhaps what she was revealing wasn't so surprising. But what really mattered was that after studying the game intensely, she could now predict when the next arrival would happen and the specific place where it would occur. Han, bewildered, asked what she meant by knowing the specific place, since he believed these arrivals happened at the same time all over the world. Bao clarified that although the arrivals occurred simultaneously, high-level objects were only concentrated in certain areas, which she had called blessed zones. She added that these zones were not fixed places, but appeared randomly in the world. However, after exhaustive analysis, Bao had mastered the pattern and could now accurately determine the exact place where the next blessed zone would appear. She, slowly approaching Han, caressed his face while whispering that she wanted him to join her side. They were about to kiss when the scene changed to Fei, who was watching the situation from another place, worried. Fei gave instructions to the departments under her command to prepare to act. She had discovered that Bao was the mastermind behind the mysterious guild they were searching for. If Han joined her, Fei knew she would have no chance of controlling the situation. Her only option was to act immediately, and prayed that Han would not betray them. Inside the office, Han firmly rejected Bao's proposal, looking her directly in the eyes. He told her that he had already given his word to someone else, and that he would not break his promise. Fei, who was listening to the conversation, was astonished, thinking that Han was referring to her. Now she wondered if what she was feeling was actually love. On the other hand, Han advised Bao to dissolve her guild since they would soon discover her anyway. After saying this, he got up and left. As he walked away, Bao's secretary asked if they should eliminate him, but Bao, smiling, said it wasn't necessary. She wanted to enjoy such an interesting man as Han, because in the end, she was sure he would be hers. Outside the building, the young Master Cao waited impatiently. Seeing Han come out, Cao mocked him, insinuating that he hadn't taken long in Bao's presence, although in reality, Han had spent quite a while there. Cao and his subordinate were surprised to see Han take a shared bicycle to leave. Furious, Cao felt even more insulted, thinking that his goddess had been sullied by a poor man, ordering his subordinate to eliminate him. But before they could act, someone stopped their car. This person was none other than Tan, who introduced himself and asked to speak kindly. Meanwhile, Han arrived home at dusk, complaining about the cost of shared bicycles and the long distance he had to pedal. He was greeted by Fei, who asked if he was tired and offered him some water. Han thanked her for the gesture, and Fei, with a smile, told him he should stay hydrated because of the heat. She also mentioned that the air conditioning wasn't working well, and with a subtle excuse, showed him a little of her figure, suggesting that she wanted to cool off more upon seeing Han blush. She leaned closer to his face, and he asked her if she felt unwell since she was acting strangely. Trying to maintain her composure, she asked him if it wasn't her who felt unwell, mentioning the other girls as well. This made Fei a little irritated. She told him that she had sent them to carry out a mission and warned him not to force her to use force to calm him down. Then she changed her tone and told him that due to his good performance that night, she had decided to reward him, but she warned him not to think that she was an easy woman. She suggested they take advantage of the time since, according to her, there was no one to interrupt them, or at least that's what she thought. Just when Han and Fei were about to enjoy their moment alone, the house detected an attack and activated its defense system, unleashing a massive explosion. Han, surprised, didn't understand what was happening, but Fei quickly explained to him that the house's defense system had automatically responded to the attack. Han was astonished to learn that the house had a defense cannon, but Fei didn't have time for details. She immediately contacted the security team to inquire about the situation outside. The team informed her that they had suffered a short-range attack, but the radar had detected it in time and activated an automatic interception. Fortunately, the safe house had not suffered significant damage, although some windows required repair. Now they were focused on locating the enemy not far from the safe house. Cao wondered how someone could have such a powerful defense system and was starting to worry. fearing he had provoked someone too strong. However, Tan told him not to worry, as what had just happened was only a test, and he was about to show him the real main course. With a gesture, Tan caused dark spores to emerge from his hand and fall to the ground. Instantly, something began to emerge. Level 2, explosive insects that quickly started firing a barrage of shots at the safe house. Inside the house, Faye ordered her team to counterattack, knowing that if the enemy had launched such a heavy attack, they must have more weapons in reserve. Han and his subordinates began to realize the seriousness of the situation when a wave of attacks devastated the safe house, reducing it to ashes. Cao, not far away, reveled in the success of the operation. Tan suggested they move to the next playground to continue having fun. Cao, still doubtful, asked if Han had really not fallen with this attack. Tan explained to him that Han was tougher than he looked, and that such a simple ending would be too boring for him. Amidst the ruins of the house, it was revealed that our protagonists were still alive. Han commented that had they not acted quickly, they would have fallen victim to the attack. Faye, furious about what had happened, decided to take action, and they headed immediately to the Poing Group's headquarters. Upon arrival, she kicked the door open and, facing Bao, asked him directly what the problem was. Faye told him that she suspected he was directly involved in the attack they had just suffered. Bao calmly asked Faye. The group's directors tried to defend their president by emphasizing her powerful identity. But before things got out of control, Han intervened and asked everyone to stay calm, suggesting that the best course was not to confront them, since they would fall into the real culprit's trap. Bao, intrigued, asked Han if he truly believed in her innocence. He replied that he trusted her, arguing that if she had wanted to attack him, she would have done so at the party. With this, Bao agreed to cooperate, which irritated Faye, as it seemed that Han's words carried much more weight than anything else. The news of Baoji's arrest, a famous businesswoman, was broadcast by all media outlets, generating significant public debate. So far, no detailed explanation had been given, but the media promised to continue reporting on new developments. Inside the station, Faye interrogated Bao about the guild, but she denied knowing what he was talking about. Faye, frustrated, asked her why she had invited Han to her party. Bao, with a smile, said that she liked him and just wanted to get to know him better, asking if she didn't have the right to do so. In another office at the station, Director Lin was questioning Han, asking if he truly believed Bao had nothing to do with the attack. He explained that since Bao wanted him to join her guild, she would have no reason to attack him. The director, intrigued, then asked who he thought the real culprit was. Han responded that what worried him wasn't the attacker's identity, but the purpose behind their actions. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Bao's secretary was approached by Tan, who asked her if she was in the room where she could foresee everything that would happen in the world. On the other hand, our protagonist tells the director that he feels they've already fallen into their enemy's trap. The director, worried, asks what they should do. Han responds that he will return to Bao's company to monitor her subordinates. Just at that moment, someone rushes into the room, informing them that something terrible has happened. The prison has been attacked by people with supernatural abilities whose goal is to free the most dangerous prisoners. The guards were asking for reinforcements, and the situation was turning into total chaos. Han decides to go to the prison to verify if the attackers are the same ones who ambushed them previously. Before he leaves, the director tells him that he has a team at his disposal that he can take with him. Han is surprised by this offer. The director introduces him to his new team, who greet him respectfully as their captain. They were elite experts capable of facing 10 people simultaneously, and were equipped with supernatural ability emblems that enhanced their combat power.